You'd think running a restaurant in a place like Nexus Station would be a peaceful gig. It's supposed to be the most advanced trading hub in this sector, gleaming corridors, zero-gravity gardens, and bureaucrats so polished they practically sweat sanitizer. But peace? No. Not when you're running the only human restaurant in the entire food court. Not when your pantry is classified as a potential security threat. Not when half your spice rack has to be smuggled in under diplomatic immunity. My name's Jack Morrison. I used to work kitchens back on Earth. Nothing fancy, just a decent little diner in Houston. Then one thing led to another. A few lucky breaks, and a long story involving a decommissioned cargo freighter and a very persuasive Andromedan investor. Now, I run Morrison's Earth Eats, tucked into the corner of Deck 7B, right between a crystalline nutrient vendor and something that smells suspiciously like wet socks, but somehow counts as food for a gas-based species. From the outside, it looks like your typical hole-in-the-wall spot. Floating menu board, repurposed bar stools, some human-themed decor to catch the eye. But what most customers don't realize until they're already chewing is that everything in my kitchen is controversial. Every herb, spice, and ingredient that we take for granted on Earth has to be labeled, cataloged, and occasionally defended in front of galactic regulatory bodies. I've had to write formal justifications for onions. I once spent 3 hours explaining mustard to a group of environmental safety agents wearing hazmat suits. Don't get me wrong, business is good. Real good. Aliens are curious. They love the Earth exotic. They'll line up just to say they tried something that made a Vexor warrior cry in public. That's not a metaphor, by the way. It actually happened last week. 7 feet of armored exoskeleton and battlefield experience, reduced to tears over a mild chicken curry. He drank 4 glasses of milk in under a minute, then swore he saw God. I told him it was just turmeric and cayenne. But while the crowds keep coming, so do the complaints. The Nexus Station Food Safety Administration, known lovingly as the GFS, has me on a watch list. I'm not kidding. They have a whole department now just for my kitchen. I'm pretty sure my name triggers an automatic alert every time I restock black pepper. It's not even that the food is dangerous in the way people think. Earth cuisine isn't trying to hurt anyone. But to most alien species, our ingredients register like biohazards. Capsaic in the compound in chili peppers gets flagged as a Class 3 defensive compound. Caffeine is a Class 7 stimulant. Even garlic trips the sensors for volatile organic emissions. I had to fill out a 92-page disclosure form just to legally serve garlic bread. You start to develop a thick skin when you work in this line of business. You get used to the weird looks, the panic, the occasional emergency evacuation drill. I've had chairs break under fleeing customers. I've had diplomats faint. I've had beings cry, scream, laugh, and once enter a full meditative trance after eating sourdough toast. You learn to roll with it. You learn to smile politely while explaining that no, the vinegar in the hot sauce is not a corrosive agent. And yes, the smell of roasting onions is supposed to make your eyes sting. I used to be proud of my little operation. Still am, honestly. It's more than a restaurant, it's a cultural outpost. A reminder that humans bring more to the table than politics or mining rights or mercenary work. We bring flavor. Real, unapologetic, punch-you-in-the-face flavor. But to the rest of the galaxy, that flavor might as well be a controlled substance. There was a time, early on, when I tried to tone things down, make the food more palatable to alien taste receptors. I cut out the chili, swapped cumin for salt, boiled things too long. I even served flavorless protein paste shaped like meatloaf. The place nearly went under. Turns out, people didn't want a sterilized, alien-approved version of Earth food. They wanted the real deal. They wanted the thrill. They wanted to eat something that came with a side of danger and a waiver form. So I doubled down. I leaned into the madness. I rebuilt my spice rack, smuggled in proper ingredients, and started naming dishes like thermonuclear wings and chemical romance chili. I stopped apologizing and started warning. This dish may cause sweating, spontaneous tears, and existential clarity. Eat at your own risk. And you know what? They loved it. They started lining up just to survive a meal. Diplomats brought guests, journalists wrote articles. The Silicon Consciousness sent probes just to record the experience of flavor, something their species had never known. The Vexor military now includes curry resistance as part of their elite training. Of course, there's still trouble. There's always trouble. The GFA still comes around, usually in teams of 3, suited up like they're entering a nuclear spill. They scan my kitchen, confiscate suspicious sauces, and argue over whether black beans count as explosive materials. I keep everything labeled. I log every batch. I even agree to let them install scanners, though I warned them they'd melt if I made vindaloo. Spoiler, they melted. At this point, I've accepted that my restaurant is never going to be normal. It's not just a place to eat, it's an experience. A dare, a challenge, a front row seat to the insanity of human taste buds. And honestly, I wouldn't have it any other way. So yeah, Nexus Station might be the shining jewel of galactic commerce. But somewhere on Deck 7B, there's a small, overworked kitchen filled with smells that can trigger station-wide lockdowns. There's a chef who's part diplomat, part mad scientist, and part spice smuggler. And there's a line of curious aliens waiting hazmat suits on. Waivers signed, nervous but excited to find out what it means to eat like a human. Welcome to Morrison's Earth Eats. We're not safe, we're not sorry, and we're always cooking. I learned pretty quickly that spices, at least the ones humans grew up with, don't mean the same thing to the rest of the galaxy. On Earth, spice is about flavor, tradition, a little heat if you're bold. Out here, spice sets off alarms, literal ones. Flashing lights, screaming sensors, force fields dropping like we just opened a biohazard container. All because of something as innocent as black pepper. The first time it happened, I was just making a basic lunch service. Nothing fancy grilled chicken over rice, seasoned with turmeric, cumin, a dash of cayenne. It was the kind of thing my grandmother would make on a quiet Sunday. Comfort food. But the moment I dropped the cayenne into the pan, the kitchen's environmental sensors triggered a Class 2 irritant alert. The system didn't know what it was smelling, only that it matched a molecular profile used in defensive sprays across 3 planetary wars. Security sealed my kitchen for 6 hours. The food was cold by the time they let me back in. After that, I started doing some research. It wasn't just cayenne, it was everything. Garlic, volatile organic compound, mustard seeds, enzyme disruptors, nutmeg. Apparently a mild neurotoxin to half the species within 5 light years. And don't even get me started on capsaicin, the compound in chili peppers. According to the Galactic Food Safety Administration, capsaicin is a Class 3 defensive substance, bordering on Class 4 depending on concentration. They actually have a whole chart. Somewhere in their files, there's a flowchart where jalapenos fall just under tear gas, and ghost peppers qualify as biological deterrents. It's ridiculous, honestly, but also kind of hilarious if you're into dark comedy. I serve hot sauce, and suddenly I'm treated like I'm stockpiling weapons. 1 bottle of Dave's Insanity sauce, carefully smuggled through a series of diplomatic favors, triggered a containment drill that evacuated half the food court. I still get hate mail from a gas breather species who claimed it ruined their perception filters for a week. And yet, the customers keep coming. There's something addictive about danger, even if it comes in the form of buffalo mac and cheese. Take Ambassador Blore, for example. He's a diplomatic envoy from a species that doesn't even have taste buds in the traditional sense, just chemical receptors that translate sensations in a way I still don't fully understand. But somehow Blore loves spice. The hotter, the better. I've seen his gelatinous form ripple with what I'm told is anticipation every time I sprinkle cayenne over his dish. When I made him ghost pepper wings once, he uploaded the sensation to his people's shared memory network. Apparently, it became something of a rite of passage. That was not my intention. Then there's General Zor of the Vexor military. Big guy, tough, covered in armor and about as subtle as a meteor strike. He wandered into my place out of curiosity one afternoon and asked for something mild. I gave him a basic chicken curry earth mild, that is. 2 bites in, and he was crying. tears rolling down his face, mandibles twitching, gulping down milk like his life depended on it. Which, to be fair, it might felt like. He still comes back, though. Says he wants to build tolerance, calls it training. It's the same story across the board. Aliens show up thinking they're ready for Earth food. They leave with their chemical sensors fried and a newfound respect for human masochism. I started keeping a tally of how many customers we've made cry had to stop when we hit triple digits. Now it's just a wall of photos marked survivors of the spice. Of course, not everyone's a fan. The GFSA shows up weekly at this point. Full suits, scanners, attitude. They walk in like they're raiding a drug lab, scanning every surface for restricted compounds. They've confiscated cinnamon sticks. Declared vinegar, a potential destabilizer. Once, they tried to arrest me over a bottle of ketchup for exceeding the legal acidity limit. Inspector Zix Tix leads the squad. 8 feet of armored mantis in a hazmat suit, and she treats oregano like it's enriched uranium. The moment she steps in, her scanner goes off. Doesn't matter what I'm cooking. Could be oatmeal. She still lectures me like I'm hosting a chemical weapons seminar. I've tried reasoning with her. Explained that humans have been eating this stuff for centuries. It's not poison, it's food. But to her, and the law she enforces, it doesn't matter. If a substance causes physiological effects beyond nutritional value, it's flagged. And human food causes a lot of effects. Emotional spikes, endorphin rushes, sweating, crying, occasional hallucinations. To us, that's a good meal. To them, that's grounds for investigation. The worst part, they're not entirely wrong. We really do react differently to flavor. We like the burn, the tear-inducing spice, the borderline painful heat. It's a thrill, a challenge, a celebration. For most of the galaxy, that's madness. Eating should be about sustenance, not survival. But for humans, it's always been more. It's culture, identity, a dare. So yeah, maybe we are a little crazy, but maybe that's the point. The longer I run this restaurant, the more I realize that Earth cuisine doesn't just taste different, it means something different. When aliens come here and try our food, they're not just eating, they're experiencing, they're taking a risk, pushing their limits, connecting with something utterly foreign. And despite the warning signs, the hazard labels, and the paperwork stacked to the ceiling, they keep coming back. Some even bring friends. I've seen diplomats negotiate over a bowl of chili. I've seen teenagers from 3-star systems post spice challenges on the interstellar net, daring each other to survive Sriracha. I've seen sentient gas clouds vibrate with joy over barbecue sauce. Somehow, amidst all the chaos, this little corner of Earth has become a sensation. So go ahead. Call it chemical warfare. Call it reckless. Call it dangerous. I call it dinner. And trust me, we're just getting started. The Galactic Food Safety Administration shows up like clockwork. Every rotation, right around the start of the lunch rush, just when the line's getting long and the Buffalo Mac is bubbling perfectly. They come in a squad, always 3 of them, always in those pristine white hazmat suits like they're entering a toxic spill instead of a kitchen. Their scanners beep before they even reach the counter. Every time. To them, my restaurant is a crime scene waiting to happen. I get it, kind of. From their perspective, Morrison's Earth Eats isn't a place to grab lunch. It's a biochemical hazard zone, a ticking time bomb of chili powder and capsaicin that could take out half the deck if I add too much cayenne to the wrong sauce. The fact that I'm still open is a minor miracle. The fact that I'm still standing behind the stove without having been deported or arrested is thanks entirely to the one thing bureaucrats hate most: paperwork loopholes and diplomatic immunity. But make no mistake, they're trying to shut me down. Inspector Zix Tix is the worst of the bunch. She's a towering insectoid from some mantis-like species with compound eyes, twitchy antennae, and a voice like grinding glass. I'm not sure if she's personally offended by human cooking or just incredibly bored with her job. But either way, she takes it out on me. Every visit is an interrogation. Every ingredient is a violation. She once wrote a 37-page report on my use of cilantro, claimed it interfered with respiratory efficiency in certain silicon-based organisms. I asked if she'd ever heard of salsa. She didn't laugh. Now, I'm not saying the GFA doesn't have a job to do. There are some sketchy food vendors out there. Some of the stuff in the far-off sectors really can melt your tongue or alter your DNA if you're not careful. But Earth food, spicy, sure, intense, definitely. But safe as long as you don't panic over a little pepper and label it a bio-threat. Unfortunately, the GFA doesn't operate on common sense. They operate on regulations, paragraphs and clauses and intergalactic code numbers that stretch longer than most novels. And by those standards, a lot of what I cook crosses the line. Take capsaicin, the heat compound in chili peppers. According to Galactic Regulation 47B, Paragraph 9, no food establishment may serve substances with a molecular structure classified as a defensive compound without appropriate warning labels, safety protocols, and containment measures. I've read it so many times I could recite it in my sleep. Which is why my kitchen now has 16 hazard signs, a wall-mounted disclaimer, and a waiver form you have to sign before ordering anything hotter than black pepper. Still not enough for Zix Tix. Last week she showed up with 2 junior inspectors, one of them in a containment suit so big it made them trip over their own feet, and immediately accused me of harboring unregistered stimulants. She wasn't wrong, technically. I had a stash of coffee beans tucked behind the flour bags. Real, earth-grown coffee. Highly illegal, highly prized, and highly necessary if you're trying to function before 9 a.m. Blore, my best customer and unofficial legal shield, tried to smooth things over by claiming cultural exchange laws, but by then one of the inspectors had already scanned the bag. The alarms kicked in, the station went on partial lockdown, and I had to sit through a full search and seizure process while my buffalo mac and cheese went cold on the stove. They took the coffee, confiscated it as a Class 7 psychoactive stimulant. Zix Tix looked positively triumphant, like she'd just defused a bomb. I wanted to scream. Instead, I wrote up a new menu with decaf options and tripled the number of caution signs. That's what running this place feels like half the time. Cooking with one hand and filling out risk assessment forms with the other. Everything's a potential violation. Vinegar is corrosive. Cinnamon is a volatile aromatic. Even onions made the list last cycle, classified as a lacrimatory hazard after someone burst into tears and accused me of attacking them emotionally. There's nothing I can do to satisfy them. I've tried. I've added ventilation systems. I've installed neutralization stations. I've created mild versions of every dish. I've labeled every jar, every spice tin, every oil bottle with color-coded warning levels. It's like running a restaurant inside a weapons lab. But the real kicker, despite all the regulations, despite all the threats, they still haven't shut me down. Why? Because of the cultural clause. Thanks to a technicality buried deep in the Galactic Cultural Preservation Act, traditional Earth cuisine, when presented as part of a recognized cultural exchange, is granted provisional exemption from standard food safety classifications. As long as I can prove cultural significance, I get to keep cooking. Barely. Blore leaned into that clause hard during our last inspection. Pulled out a stack of testimonials from alien diplomats who've used human food as part of negotiations. Claimed our cuisine fosters emotional vulnerability and shared sensory experience. Said we were promoting galactic understanding through flavor. It was just enough to stop the shutdown order. Zix Tix was furious, but the regs tied her claws. So I stay open, under surveillance, under pressure, but open. Every time they come back, I half expect it to be the end. I keep my kitchen spotless. I keep my recipes logged and my spice rack locked behind a biometric scanner. I fill out every form, every protocol, every last ridiculous document they throw at me. Because I know one misstep, one unauthorized jalapeno, one batch of ghost pepper wings left unsupervised, and it's over. But here's the thing. They never stop me from cooking. Not really. Because deep down, even the GFSA knows what we're doing here matters. This isn't just about spice. It's about identity. Humanity doesn't have the biggest ships, or the strongest military, or the fanciest tech. But what we do have is flavor, chaos, boldness. We don't do bland. We don't do safe. We cook like we live loud, messy, and full of risk. And the rest of the galaxy? They're starting to crave it. So let them come. Let them scan, search, threaten, and write their reports. I'll keep stirring the pot. I'll keep serving the spice. Because this kitchen may be dangerous, but it's also the only place on Nexus Station where flavor means freedom. And deep down, even Inspector Zix Tix knows it. The day this shutdown order almost became real, I knew I had to do something drastic. The inspectors were getting bolder. Zix Tix had started showing up with full evidence teams, walking around with containment drones and portable decontamination units. My spice rack had been flagged for excessive capsaicin proximity, and a batch of marinara sauce got temporarily classified as a potential mutagenic compound. I was 5 minutes away from having my kitchen sealed in a Class B quarantine field when Blore stepped in again with that uncanny knack for diplomacy he always pulled out at the last possible second. As a recognized cultural envoy, he declared in his usual formal ripple, "I invoke Section 12 of the Galactic Cultural Preservation Act. Chef Morrison shall be granted the opportunity to demonstrate the cultural significance of these so-called substances. A full tasting protocol. A demonstration dinner." The room went quiet. Zix Tix's antennae twitched like she'd just been served a subpoena with a side of wasabi. "You want to hold a dinner party," she said flatly, "to defend your use of prohibited biochemical agents?" "They're spices," I said, raising both hands like I was under arrest. "We're talking about paprika and black pepper, not nerve gas." "Very well," she snapped. "You'll follow strict protocol. 5 biological classifications minimum. Documented analysis of each reaction. Full hazard control. I'll host it here," I replied before I could stop myself. "In the restaurant, in my kitchen, where it's supposed to happen." Zix Tix nodded once, cold and deliberate. "You have 1 rotation. That gave me just under 36 Earth hours to plan, prep, and save my livelihood. We got to work immediately." Blore helped me draw up the guest list, 1 from each of the major biological categories: gas-based, silicon-based, crystalline, carbon-based, energy-formed, and even 1 probability entity who only existed in partial phases until she got emotionally invested in a dish. I spent the next 12 hours modifying recipes. Everything had to walk a tightrope between recognizable Earth flavor and not causing a spontaneous species-wide allergic reaction. I toned down the heat, subbed ingredients that wouldn't trigger containment alerts, and made sure each dish came with a full list of chemical breakdowns. The kitchen looked like a hybrid of a culinary school and a science lab. GFSA agents had installed 3 layers of hazard sensors and were monitoring everything in real time. I couldn't even slice an onion without triggering a dozen chemical alerts. I had to sign 17 liability waivers just to use garlic. Blore, for his part, was thrilled. "This is exactly what Earth cuisine needs," he said while adjusting a translation module. "Visibility, diplomacy, structured chaos." Structured chaos was right. The panel of taste testers arrived 1 by 1, escorted by security and flanked by med drones. General Zor of the Vexer military looked like he was walking into a battlefield. Lady Crystalline of the Silicon Consciousness requested to observe without tasting. For computational modeling, the Andromedan teenage ambassador brought her own fork and a tube of antacid gale. I greeted them all with the kind of smile you wear when you're serving dinner and your entire career is on the line. "For tonight," I announced, "we'll be showcasing a full-tasting menu of traditional Earth foods, carefully adapted for cross-species compatibility." Zix Tix hovered near the kitchen entrance, her scanners active, recording every movement I made. I half expected her to pounce the moment I opened the spice cabinet. The first course was garlic bread. Just bread, butter, parsley, and minced garlic. I served it warm, golden, just crispy enough around the edges. As I placed it in front of Lady Crystalline, the kitchen alarm screamed. "Volatile organic compound release," the sensor declared. Zix Tix reached for her emergency override key. but Blore raised a pseudopod in protest. "Please, let them taste." Lady Crystalline vibrated faintly, absorbing the data. Her form shimmered. "Oh," she said in synthesized speech. "The flavor vectors, they resonate." "I think she likes it," I said. "Uploading to the collective," she replied. "This sensation must be shared." We were off to a good start. The second course was soup, just a vegetable broth with basil and bay leaf. Mild, safe, but as soon as the steam hit the air, it triggered a Class 1 inhalable irritant warning. General Zor kept his blast visor down as he tried it. After 2 spoonfuls, he looked up and grunted. "Pleasant," he said. "Slightly aggressive aftertaste. Acceptable. I'll take it." Course after course, I walked the line between comfort and catastrophe. My spice blends were just restrained enough to avoid station-wide lockdowns, but just bold enough to remind everyone they were eating something human. I served a mild tikka masala cooked in full view of 10 scanners and 1 very anxious safety officer. I presented chocolate mousse to an energy-based being who pulsed brighter with each bite. I gave the probability entity a sourdough roll, and her form stabilized into something almost tangible for 4 entire seconds. "This is working," Blore whispered to me between courses. "You're actually pulling this off. For now," I muttered, stirring the sauce for the final plate. "We still have dessert." Then came the interruption. The lights dimmed. A klaxon blared. Not the usual food alert, the real deal. "Breach alarm." Zix-Tix comm buzzed. Multiple unidentified vessels inbound. Boarders in the commercial sector. "They're heading for the food court." I froze, ladle in hand. "What kind of pirates raid a food court?" "The kind that heard about a stash of Class 7 stimulants," Blore replied grimly. "Your coffee beans weren't as secret as you thought." Before I could react, the doors to my kitchen burst open. A crew of ragged space pirates barged in, weapons drawn. "Hand over the illegal substances," their leader growled. Then he sniffed the air. "What is that smell?" "Tikka masala," I said. "You want some?" He took 1 step closer, then staggered back. It's burning my face. "It's just turmeric," I said. "Well, and some paprika. And a little cardamom." In the confusion, one of the pirates picked up a jalapeno popper and bit into it, he screamed. And that was my opening. I grabbed my cast iron skillet, officially registered as a blunt force tool in 3 jurisdictions, and started swinging. Blore absorbed a ladle of soup and launched it at another pirate. General Zor tackled a third with a battle cry I'll never forget. Even Lady Crystalline joined in, projecting the pirates' terrified expressions across every public screen on the station. By the time the smoke cleared, the pirates were gone, fled, humiliated, leaving behind their weapons and at least 2 strong legal complaints. Zix-Tix stood in the middle of the chaos, eyes wide, antennas twitching. I set down the pan. So, dessert. The report that followed was over 2,000 pages long. But the executive summary was short. While human culinary practices remain volatile, their demonstrated value in station defense and cultural diplomacy warrants continued exemption. Reclassification from biochemical threat to controlled cultural substance is recommended. I got to keep my restaurant. Even better, I got recognized. Earth cuisine was officially listed as a cultural export. My spice rack got full legal protection. My coffee stash declared a strategic stimulant for diplomatic morale. Zix-Tix still visits. She doesn't smile, but she hasn't shut me down either. And every now and then she orders the garlic bread. No complaints. By the time the pirate situation had been cleaned up both figuratively and literally, I was half expecting the Galactic Food Safety Authority to shut me down for good. Even though we'd fended off the intruders with cast iron and curry, the station still had scorch marks, overturned chairs, and 1 very confused Vexorian soldier handcuffed to my pantry. I was wiping blood or possibly hot sauce off the front of my apron when Zix-Tix re-entered the kitchen. She didn't say a word for a full 30 seconds, just stood there scanning the wreckage, antennae twitching like they were catching a radio signal only she could hear. "I suppose you're going to cite me for battlefield contamination," I said, trying to sound casual. Or maybe classify cumin as a weaponized particulate? She blinked slowly. Your actions may have prevented the loss of dozens of civilian lives. Your food neutralized 3 armed threats. That jalapeno, in particular, is now under independent investigation. Lore piped up from behind the counter. It was an unintentional defense measure. Cultural cuisine as a deterrent mechanism. Fascinating, really. Zix-Tix glanced at him, then looked at me. You may proceed with dessert. I blinked. You're serious. This dinner is now officially under cultural security protocols. You have 30 minutes. I looked at the wrecked dining room, the half-shocked guests, the scorch marks on the wall, and then down at the untouched trays of tiramisu I'd prepped the night before. Give me 15. The next quarter hour was a blur. I worked like a man possessed, moving faster than I had since culinary school finals, whipping cream, layering espresso-soaked lady fingers, shaving dark chocolate. I didn't even care that 6 of my burners were offline and half my sous chefs had run screaming during the pirate attack. This dessert was going out when I carried the trays into the dining area, now half transformed into a triage zone with overturned tables and stunned security officers. There was a moment of silence. Final course, I announced. Earth dessert, tiramisu. Mild stimulant properties, contains caffeine, sugar, dairy, and a little hope. I placed slices in front of the remaining guests. Lady Crystalline blinked a soft, appreciative spectrum. General Zor grunted and grabbed his with both hands. Even the energy being flickered slightly in anticipation. I stepped back and watched. The spoon went into the moss. A slow bite, a pause. A hum, real or synthetic, I couldn't tell. Then the feedback began. This is, Zor said, chewing thoughtfully. Like eating courage, Lady Crystalline rippled through 12 harmonic frequencies at once. This flavor vector is resolute. It embraces entropy. The Andromedan ambassador let out a sound that, by local translation standards, was closest to you-oo-oo. Even Zix-Tix, who had maintained the emotional range of a dry stapler all evening, stared at her slice with something approximating curiosity. After a long moment, she picked up a spoon and took a cautious bite. Her antennae twitched. Once. Then again. No words. But she didn't stop eating. When the tasting concluded, Blore stood beside me and raised his voice. Esteemed guests, I trust you now understand that Earth cuisine is not merely biochemical nonsense. It is tradition, expression, defense. It is diplomacy, emotion, and yes, occasionally, weapon-grade deliciousness. There were murmurs of agreement. Even the Vexorian general, notorious for disliking anything not grown in vacuum-sealed nutrient cubes, gave a slow, begrudging nod. Zix-Tix stood up. This event, she said, will be entered into record under Clause 47B, Cultural Anomaly and Emergency Deterrence Demonstration. Chef Morrison's methods, while unconventional, have been deemed effective under high-pressure multi-species conditions. His establishment will retain operational status pending ongoing safety evaluations. Then she looked directly at me. You may continue to cook. For now. For now. And with that, she turned and left, trailing a faint scent of espresso behind her. After the guests had cleared out and the med drones finished scanning the last scorch marks, Blore and I stood alone in the kitchen. We pulled it off, he said. You actually did it. You cooked your way out of a regulatory shutdown in a pirate raid. I dropped into a chair, suddenly feeling every one of the last 48 sleepless hours. And we didn't even serve the chili. Blore made a noise that might have been a laugh or a digestive process, probably for the best. We're still submitting paperwork on the last time you served that. We sat in silence for a moment. The kitchen hummed. Somewhere in the back, the fridge beeped, reminding me I'd left the espresso syrup on high-risk cool-down status. Do you think they'll come back? I asked. The pirates? Probably not. I heard one of them begged for asylum in the janitor corps rather than face your spice rack again. I chuckled. And Zix-Tix? Blore hesitated, then grinned an odd, stretching ripple across his upper membrane. She'll be back. I saw her swipe the dessert recipe off the sensor feed. I raised an eyebrow. Zix-tix? Stealing recipes? Consider it flattery, or espionage. Either way, it's a compliment. Over the next few weeks, things slowly returned to normal. Or at least, our version of normal. Earth cuisine was officially recategorized as culturally protected substance. I had to put up 17 new warning signs, but I didn't mind. The spice rack stayed stocked, the sauces flowed, and customers, both human and otherwise, lined up to try the food that had once been labeled a threat to interstellar peace. The media dubbed me the culinary combatant. Some station residents even called the restaurant Sector 7 seasoned. I didn't love the pun, but the line outside my door stretched around the docking bay. Every so often, I caught Zix-tix lingering at a table near the back, pretending to review environmental reports while nursing a carefully measured espresso. She never smiled, but she never left it unfinished. And Blore, he became my official cultural liaison, technically, but really, he was my friend. The kind of friend who would defend your right to serve pepper as a birthright and throw soup like a grenade when things got messy. I learned something that night. It's not just about the food, it's about the story behind it. The chaos, the flavor, the resistance baked into every bite. Cooking on a death world like Earth wasn't just a matter of taste, it was survival. Pride, expression, a declaration. You can regulate ingredients, you can mandate portion sizes. You can slap a warning label on a habanero. But you can't sterilize soul, and in the end, a good meal speaks for itself. Word of the incident spread faster than I expected. By the next galactic cycle, the footage from the pirate takedown had leaked, probably thanks to some over-eager security intern who thought it'd make for good training material. Within hours, the entire event was trending on interstellar forums under the tag Spice Strike. The holovids were ridiculous. One frame showed a pirate writhing on the floor after a direct hit from my ghost pepper gumbo. Another looped Blore hurling a pot of hot ramen like it was a guided missile. But the real star of the show was the tiramisu. A dozen slowed-down reaction shots of dignitaries tasting it played like a dessert-themed opera. I thought it might blow over. A funny footnote in galactic politics. I was wrong. 3 days after the event, my kitchen received its first diplomatic request. Not for a meal this time, it was a representative from the Arythal Syndicate. Tall, silver-skinned, and nervous around anything above room temperature, she stepped into my restaurant with a formal briefcase and a heat-dampening vest. "I come on behalf of the Syndicate's Culinary Defense Division," she said. I blinked. That's a real department. Now it is. She slid the briefcase onto my counter and opened it with a hiss. Inside was a neatly organized set of data scrolls, sealed sample tubes, and no joke, a scorched, vacuum-sealed chicken wing. "We retrieved this from the battlefield," she said. "The Syndicate wishes to study it, understand it, possibly reverse engineer it." I stared at the chicken wing, then back at her. "You want to copy my buffalo sauce? Officially, we want to study the tactical applications of fermented capsaicin emulsions." I couldn't help but laugh. "Lady, that's just hot sauce." "Exactly," she said, with alarming seriousness. Within a week, 3 more governments reached out. The Vexorian Conclave wanted to buy a sample of my spice blend. The Trinary sent a delegation of researchers dressed in full hazmat suits to observe a live cooking session. Even the Confederated Archive, an ancient, practically extinct race of archivists, sent a glowing orb with a single message: "Your sauces bend the pattern. We seek comprehension." Suddenly, I was no longer just a chef. I was a potential arms dealer. Blore found it hilarious. "They're acting like you invented interstellar fire," he said, watching a broadcast from a political roundtable on culinary supremacy and human flavor threats. One Zentari ambassador declared Earth-based cooking a bioempathic manipulation tool. Another suggested that if humans had introduced cuisine earlier in galactic history, we might rule by now not with warships, but with brunch. Not everyone was thrilled, though. Some factions pushed back hard. The Galactic Regulatory Council issued a Level 2 culinary intervention order, mandating that all human chefs register any dishes containing more than 3 Tier 2 sensory stimulants. I had to fill out forms just to serve cinnamon. Others went further. The Coalition of Thermal Harmony tried to ban earth spices from public institutions, claiming they induced reckless behavior and digestive defiance. One culinary governor even proposed building anti-aroma filtration zones around schools to protect children from what he called olfactory radicalization. I got hate mail. Some of it was weirdly poetic. Your garlic burns the stars. Some of it was just confused. Stop weaponizing pudding. But underneath all the outrage was something else: curiosity. Obsession. I knew it the moment I saw the leaked footage from a Vexorian military base. It showed soldiers in full armor gathered around a steel table, each of them hesitantly holding forks. A tray sat in the center. On it, a single, visibly steaming enchilada. The lead officer, a grizzled veteran with a voice like gravel under pressure, looked into the camera. For the glory of the conclave. They took a bite in unison. 3 of them immediately gasped. One started tearing up. Another stood still for 10 full seconds, then whispered, "I taste victory." The clip ended with a hard cut to static. Blore turned to me. "They're testing your food in war simulations now. They're testing enchiladas." Blore, exactly. You've created tactical comfort food. He wasn't joking. By the end of the month, Earth cuisine was under official investigation by the Council's Strategic Threat Assessment Bureau. They didn't ban it, but they issued a rare tier yellow cultural influence watch, typically reserved for psychic propaganda or addictive virtual reality loops. I got an official letter hand-delivered by a drone that said, "Your creations may have unintended influence on interspecies emotional calibration and group cohesion. Please cease use of chilies exceeding 800,000 Scoville units in diplomatic contexts until further notice." I framed it and hung it in the kitchen. Meanwhile, back on Earth, the news exploded. My face was on every screen. Interviews, specials, memes. One popular image showed me in a chef's coat, holding a ladle like a sword, with the caption, "He came to cook. He stayed to conquer." They called me the Flavor General. Someone even made an action figure came with tiny spice jars and a spring-loaded frying pan. Embassies on Earth began hiring chefs from my old culinary school. Governments started funding gastronomy labs. The Defense Department classified the top 5 hot sauce recipes under culinary encryption. Some people called it silly, others weren't laughing. One high-ranking Zentari strategist warned, "The human capacity to influence morale through sensory engagement is a threat to the natural order of warfare." I think he meant it as a bad thing. Through it all, I just kept cooking. My kitchen became a rotating door of diplomats, agents, researchers, and very cautious first-time tasters. I had to develop a color-coded warning system for spice levels. We even started offering diplomatic detox menus for species with weak gastrointestinal flora. Zix's tics returned more frequently. She never ordered directly, but she'd linger near the pass window, pretending to inspect regulations while sneaking spoonfuls of sauce samples. I caught her once, mid-bite of mango habanero glaze. She didn't say anything. But later that night, I found an anonymous note on my prep table. "The spice is not the weapon. It is the language. You're speaking fluently." I smiled. That's when it hit me. This wasn't about food anymore. Not really. It wasn't even about humans. It was about connection, about something deeper than politics or policy. The reason they feared our food wasn't because it hurt. It was because it mattered. Because it carried stories, memories, emotion. Because when you serve someone a meal made with intention, with history and heat, you're not just feeding them, you're showing them who you are. And for civilizations built on protocol and sterility, that was terrifying. But for the brave, it was irresistible. It started small. At first, I thought the guy was just another culinary student shadowing my work. Polite, quiet, dressed in regulation whites, a bit too clean for someone who claimed to have spent 2 years in a grease pit on Rigel Prime. But the way he moved, It was too precise. Like he was cataloging everything, measuring how long I stirred, where I kept my knives, even how often I checked the temperature on the gumbo. The giveaway was when he spent 3 hours cleaning a prep station that hadn't even been used. "Let me guess," I said one night as I scrubbed dried pho from a wok. "You're not actually here to learn how to cook." He blinked, hesitated, then sighed and leaned against the counter, pulling a small badge from inside his coat. It shimmered with the unmistakable seal of the Galactic Intercultural Intelligence Commission. "You can call me Jarek," he said. "I can also call you out," I muttered, tossing the wok into the sink. But he didn't try to stop me. Instead, he pulled out a worn notebook, one page already stained with what I recognized as the sesame oil from my teriyaki glaze. "I'm here on directive to document human culinary methodologies. Identify the origin of their persuasive properties." I gave him a long look. "You mean flavor?" He nodded sheepishly. "And its effect on morale, negotiation, and, social disarmament." Jarek wasn't the last. Over the next month, I started noticing them. They came from all corners of the galaxy, undercover agents posing as kitchen staff, line cooks, even sanitation inspectors. Some were better than others. One guy tried to convince me that in his culture, onions were peeled with laser shears. The thing was, I didn't mind. They weren't malicious. They were curious, desperate even. The same way people act when they've heard whispers of something powerful, something forbidden. Human cuisine had become a mystery, a myth. And now these agents wanted the recipe for what made it more than just sustenance, what made it meaningful. So, I let them in. Not to mock them, not even to stop them, because I knew something they didn't. The recipe wasn't in the ingredients. It was in the stories. I watched Jarek struggle with a simple roux, brow furrowed in concentration. I didn't correct him, just stood by, waiting. After the 5th try, he finally said, "Why does it have to be exact? Why can't we just synthesize the compounds?" "Because," I replied, "this isn't chemistry. It's conversation." He frowned. "With who?" "With the person you're cooking for. With the person you were when you learned it. With the memory of the person who taught it to you." He stared at the thickening paste in the pan like it might start whispering answers. But that night he made his own gumbo. It wasn't great, a little salty. But when he tasted it, his eyes went wide. "I remember, my uncle," he murmured. "I didn't even know I missed him. I just nodded." That's the part you can't steal. Another one, a Xantari agent named Vel, tried to extract my fried rice process by following me for a week straight, timing every toss of the wok, every dash of soy sauce. I finally sat her down and said, "Try making it yourself. No tools, no scanner, just your hands," she grumbled, but agreed. 2 hours later, she served a scorched, clumpy mess that smelled more like burned algae than dinner. She looked defeated. But then something shifted. "This feels honest," she said softly. "I failed, but I cared. That's cooking," I replied. "You show up, you fail, then you taste the lesson." She stayed 3 more weeks. Some of them tried to report back. I know because one of them, a Trinari named Kelm, approached me in secret. "They won't accept it," he whispered one night while polishing silverware. "They want to believe it's an algorithm, a secret ratio, something to be decoded." I looked at him, really looked. His hands were stained from turmeric and cumin. His apron was dusted with flour, and his eyes, they had softened. He no longer blinked as much around heat or spice. "What do you believe?" I asked. He hesitated, then smiled. "I believe your food doesn't just feed. It feels. It heals." By the 3rd month, I had more former agents than actual chefs working for me. Some still sent reports, heavily redacted, of course. But most had stopped asking questions about secrets and started asking questions about people. "What makes your mom's stew different from your aunt's? Why do some cultures fry while others steam? Is it true humans cry over soup?" Yes. Yes, we do. We cry when it reminds us of home, when it tastes like someone we lost, When it hit something deep, we didn't even know was hollow. No synthetic nutrient paste can do that. The council wasn't happy. They issued sanctions, blocked exports of certain ingredients, claimed we were causing cultural destabilization via culinary dependency. One memo actually read, "Emotional compromise induced by unauthorized suffles." But it was too late. Something had shifted. Not just in the politics, in the people. These agents trained in espionage, subterfuge, and psychological warfare had come to steal our secrets. But what they found instead were memories, humanity. Heat that didn't just burn but warmed. They couldn't explain it in reports, couldn't quantify it in scans, but they stayed. Because once you learn to cook with your soul, you can't go back to sterile diets and ration cubes. Jarek eventually took off his badge for good. He stayed on as sous chef, said it was the first time in years he felt useful without manipulating someone. Vel opened a spice shop on a fringe colony where Xantari could taste cumin for the first time. Helm started writing not reports, but cookbooks, his latest, Spices Between Worlds. I didn't change the galaxy. I didn't mean to. I just cooked. I told stories with garlic and grief, with laughter and lemons. And somewhere in those simmering pots, those agents, those eyes trained to see threats, found something they weren't trained for. Connection. The kind of thing that can't be stolen. Only shared. We were pinned down in the ruins of an old industrial complex, me, two other humans, and a Xarnathi communications specialist who had never seen combat before. Plasma scorched the walls, smoke drifted in from the north corridor, and every few minutes another enemy drone zipped by, scanning for life signatures. We were trapped. Sergeant Lewis was trying to patch up Carter, who'd taken shrapnel to the leg. I was out of ammo and half a second from panic when the Xarnathi Xyle started humming. It wasn't loud, just a low, strange vibration, almost like a flute made out of wind. I snapped around. "What are you doing?" He didn't answer right away, just kept humming. Then, with that eerie calm Xarnathi always had, he said, "You're on the verge of fracturing. This helps regulate cortical activity." "Music?" I asked, stunned. He tilted his head. "Resonant tonal frequencies. In my species, it's used during mourning or stress." I didn't know what to say. So I sat there, back against cracked concrete, and listened. The sound wasn't beautiful by human standards, but it was haunting. It pulled something tight in my chest. Not fear, not sadness. Something else, like memory. Lewis looked up from Carter, blood on his hands, and whispered, "Damn. That's actually kind of nice." 10 minutes later, Carter, half-conscious, murmured something through gritted teeth. "Play that. On guitar. Sounds like Johnny Cash had a nervous breakdown." Lewis laughed. First real laugh in hours. That laugh did something. I hadn't realized how far gone we were, but that sound had brought us back a little. Xyle stopped humming. Humans respond strongly to musical cues. You associate rhythm with meaning, emotion, identity. I nodded. "Yeah, we do." And just like that, we weren't just surviving anymore. We were connected. Back on base after evac, the story got around. The command thought it was funny. Alien plays lullaby. Marines cry. But for us, it was serious. Because that moment, that music, it reminded us that even in war, we weren't machines. We were still human. And Xyle? He got curious. Started asking questions. What is jazz? Why do humans tap feet to rhythm? Is pain amplified or lessened when expressed in song? So we let him in. Played him tracks from our world. Nina Simone, Metallica, Tupac, Beethoven, the Beatles. His reaction was never what we expected. "To death metal," he said. "Sounds like volcanic mourning rituals on my homeworld. To blues. This is what loneliness feels like." I recognize this now. But the real turning point came during a patrol in a desert zone on Vorix IIE. Another ambush. Another firefight. Pinned again. Half our units scattered. Communications down. Zul and I were behind a wrecked skiff, waiting for extraction when he said, "May I try something?" I nodded, not sure what else to do. He pulled out a small harmonic box he'd crafted a mix of human tech and Xarnathi vibration channels and started playing. It sounded like wind chimes underwater. Somehow, that sound drifted across the battlefield, and then one of our own Diaz started singing. Just a few lines from Ain't No Sunshine. Then someone else picked it up, and someone else, all through comms. We were outnumbered, terrified, on the edge of chaos, and we were singing. The enemy must thought we were crazy. Maybe we were. But we weren't scared anymore. We were focused, together. And when the dropships finally came, we weren't just evac'd, we were lifted. Spiritually. That night around the fire, Xyle said, "You humans, you weaponize art. Not to destroy, but to endure." We didn't correct him, because he was right. It spread. Not officially. There were no memos, no doctrine updates. But in hushed tones, among soldiers in bunkers and medics in field tents, the practice began. If a unit was stranded, someone would start a tune over short-range comms. If a recon team lost contact, a familiar melody would float back as a sign they were alive. Not for tactics, for soul. One recon squad even carried a harmonica, and their sniper marked targets with brief riffs from old westerns. Some commanders hated it, said it was unprofessional, distracting. But then we started seeing something strange. Units that sang. They stayed calmer, fought better, froze less, recovered faster. Even aliens picked it up. A Threxian gunner started learning chords on a guitar made from scrap metal. A Valari technician composed a ballad using human lullaby structures. Music crossed species like it didn't care where you were born. Because it didn't. It only cared that you felt something. Xyle became a kind of folk hero in our circles. The alien who taught humans to remember who they were through music even in combat. He started recording field tracks. Not studio stuff, real songs from the mud, the trenches, the dark moments. Voices cracking, instruments off-key, but full of truth. One of his compilations, Fire in the Silence, made it all the way back to Earth. It went viral. Suddenly, civilians were hearing what soldiers felt. Not through stats or speeches, but through harmony, dissonance. Drum beats like heartbeats. There was one track, though, that changed everything. A live recording from a failed rescue op. No survivors. Just static and one looped line of melody, over and over. We played it in silence the night we heard it. No one spoke, but we all knew what it meant. Even in the end, someone was singing. Years later, peace negotiations were held with the same species we'd once fought tooth and nail. And at the first formal dinner, Xyle, now an envoy, stood up and said, "I ask no terms. I offer no threats, only this." He tapped a button, and from every speaker came a single note. Then slowly voices joined. Human, alien, male, female, young, old. They sang together, one melody, one language beyond words. No one fired a shot. No one raised a flag. They just listened. And when the last note faded, peace wasn't a treaty anymore. It was a shared song. A shared song. Looking back, I don't remember all the missions, not the dates, not the coordinates, but I remember that first hum in the rubble. The way it quieted something inside me I didn't know was screaming. I remember Xyle saying, "Music is what your species does when it refuses to break." And I think maybe that's it. Maybe that's why humans survive. Not because we're the strongest, not even because we're the smartest, but because when the world tries to crush us, we sing back.